Welcome to A Life in Film. This episode may contain spoilers. An English actor who had his first few lines in a film called Frankenstein, directed by Kenneth Branagh and starring Robert De Niro. He also had a small role in Tomorrow Never Dies, but he really hit his stride when he appeared in Notting Hill alongside Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts. He followed this up with Iris with Judy Dench. Other credits include Monuments Men with George Clooney, and of course the hugely popular Paddington films, not to mention his extensive time spent on stage with the National Theatre and the Royal Shakespeare Company, to name a few. But he's best known for portraying Robert Crawley, Earl of Grantham, in ITV historical drama series Downton Abbey. His performance on the show has earned him nominations at the Golden Globes and 2 consecutive Primetime Emmy Award nominations, as well as 3 Screen Actor Guild Awards. He also reprised his role in the 2 Downton Abbey feature films. Our guest today is actor Hugh Bonneville. Hugh and I chat about how his journey began as a child with a dress-up box and what led him to where he is now. His new movie for Netflix, I Came By, stars George MacKay and Kelly Macdonald. Hugh, thank you for taking the time. This part, when I watched it, I wasn't expecting this from you, and it's pretty terrifying. Without giving, it's hard to talk about, isn't it, without giving away spoilers, but I think to talk about this properly, you have to. I can guess that was the reason you took this role on. It's something pretty different. What was the reason for doing this movie?
Well, really, reading the script, of course, and thinking, I've got a handle on this. This is a film about George MacKay and his mate Percy, and they're going to be our guide through the film. And then, blam, you're suddenly taken in a completely different direction, and you're introduced to a character that, again, you think on the one hand, as indeed the characters in the film did, they think, we understand this guy. And then you start peeling away the layers a bit and realising there's a lot more going on and it's a bit more peculiar. And then when you when you get to talk to Babak Anvari, the director-writer, you realise that he's even more peculiar than his own script and should probably be locked up, but it actually is a bit of a genius. So that's why I wanted to get on board. I wanted to get inside Babak's head.
Am I right in thinking Babak wrote this 20 years ago, and it was something that he was planning to do as his first film, and he wanted to keep it quite contained? But obviously he went on and won a BAFTA and other things happened before that. It's pretty amazing now that this came along at this point because he probably got a better cast, everything, bigger budget and everything else. This movie it kind of harks back to a different generation of film, like the Hitchcock kind of era. And I guess to give it away, it has that element of Psycho where you're kind of expecting one thing and another thing happens. With Paddington and the movies you've done and Downton, I was full sense of security. I was thinking, no, he's not going to be that awful. And it escalates and escalates and escalates, gets worse and worse and worse.
Completely, because going back to the script, the directions that it takes, the left and right turns that you really don't see coming, or even if you start getting used to the fact that this film's going to surprise me, it then surprises you in a way that you weren't expecting. So, and that was equally true of Under the Shadow, I thought, which was I think a wonderful piece of work, and which really got me more and more invested in the idea of this one. Because on paper, reading some of this, I thought, this is just bonkers, how's this going to work? But then seeing Under the Shadow, you realise the way that he makes films and the way that his narrative goes, and the trust you can have in him as a filmmaker, that he's not going to let his audience down, because he himself is such a fan of those genre films you were talking about, Hitchcock and sort of noir thrillers, and he's given it such a contemporary gloss, a contemporary spin, that I think he's a sort of filmmaker of real worth and distinction and individuality. So that maybe even the word Anvari-esque will come into the lexicon eventually, but he's certainly attracted this great cast, and for George to play that role, and to have Kelly and Percy on board as well. I think I'm really proud to have been part of it. It's a really interesting piece.
And your character, how do you prepare for something like this? Because you can't really method it. It's a very horrendous character. So how did you go about that?
Well, actually, if you think about people who, without spoiling what he gets up to, but people who've perhaps had a psychology like he has, you look back through history and through contemporary, if you like, real crime dramas and that sort of thing, the people who have committed crimes of certain sorts have actually often been incredibly, quotes, normal people, or you think they're normal people. The person next door who, it's very hard to talk about without spoiling, but who you think are your innocent neighbour and turn out to be actually what's behind that front door. So I think the key to characters like these is the utter normality, and in his case, the fact that he is a pillar of the establishment, albeit a retired one, but he's very much respected in the upper echelons of the establishment. Got personal contacts with the head of the local police or the Met, in his case, and friends in high places. So therefore, sort of untouchable. Almost like a British politician, dare I say, or indeed, there's almost a Masonic type connectivity at that level. I've just been doing another series called The Gold, all about the Brinksmat robbery of the 80s, where the police at the time there was a sort of nexus between the police and often journalism, but particularly with the Masons and the underworld, and so the sort of the nod and the wink and the handshake and the who to pursue and who not to pursue was very much there was a if you like a sort of hierarchy or other upper echelons of society that was all run on a clandestine basis, and you could argue that some of that still pervades today. And what some of the frustration of the younger characters is about is that they're feeling voiceless they're shouting into a void, and those in control, in power, hold the strings and can dictate the pace of society and who's accepted in and who's not.
That's how I mean, watching this film, that was something that, you're rooting for those characters to take you down, and you hope that it's going to have an ending that you want. Through the film, you're like, well, maybe it's not going to go the way I want it to go, but it kind of, the twists and turns really threw me. I was like, I actually have no idea where this is going, and it really did pull me in. Can you now that you've played a whole range of characters, but this has got to be surely the most horrific. Can you see yourself playing more villainous characters in the future?
Well, I don't think he's villainous, but there we are. That's just my own perspective on the sweet guy who's been dealt a bum hand. Obviously any part that gives you a bit of a new avenue to pursue and more fun to be had, and as they say, the devil has the best tunes. Anything that is a bit more surprising than the last one you played is good fun.
The part that terrified me was the stillness of your performance. You would be, there's a particular moment where you say something to one of the officers and you close the door and you have a quick word with her, and because you're so still and calm the whole way through, and then there's that, and it was a real kind of tingles down the back of the spine, and oh my God, you suddenly see that kind of glimpse of who he really is.
Yes, and that's all in the writing. It was like when we recorded that, he says something to I can't remember what the words are, to the police officer now, and it was a bit indistinct, and so we shot it again, and then Babak said, actually it's quite good that you don't quite hit, so that like the officer herself, she sort of goes, did he just say, it was like a proper gaslighting moment, did he just say what I think he said? And so hopefully the audience does too, but the stillness thing was something quite conscious, and so there's a bit in a swimming pool when I emerge, and I said, I would like it to look like a crocodile. He just comes above the water like that, spying his next friend. And that was just good. I often think about characters in terms of their pulse rate, and there was the famously Bjorn Borg, the great tennis player, always had a famously low pulse rate, even at moments of great tension and crisis, and that's why he was such a supreme player. And I always think that this character has a particularly slow pulse rate because what can possibly go wrong?
Babak, what was that relationship like?
Well, terrific, because it's come from his uniquely twisted brain, so there's a bit of a worry about Babak, but so you want to protect him because he clearly needs help. On the other hand, he's a bit of a visionary at the same time, and you want to do your best for any director that's been particularly a writer-director. You're trying to help them bring their vision to life, and you don't want to muck it up. So at the same time, you want to try and defend is the wrong word, not defend your character, but that makes sure that your character is protected in terms of credibility and surprise and everything else. So we talk quite a lot about the background of the character. Even on the day, we'd say, well, would he actually even on the set, we'd look at some of the props and the tone of the room, and I'd say, well, talk to me about why that prop's there. What's that telling us about the character's background? And so he was very collaborative in that sense, and we discussed things. And I always feel strongly that you've got to, even if you're in a strange fictional world, or not strange, but in a fictional world, you've got to believe in it somehow. Even if it's on a spaceship and set in 300 years in the future, you've got to believe in the continuity or the coherence of the universe you're in. And so I would do this. I would discuss with Babak, saying, if he's in this room in this beat, can we also believe that he'd get to that room in that beat, and that sort of thing. So we'd always map things out and make sure it's credible, so that even if in the edit it all changes, you get a sense that you could defend each scene or each moment and each situation. And even for a character who's as idiosyncratic as Hector, that there's an internal logic to what's going on, to his world that he believes in that makes sense. There's a brilliant touch which is in the script, but I was concerned that you don't notice in the film that actually all the windows have got a sort of mirror thing on them. And looking at the house from the outside, you wouldn't necessarily know that. And so he'd marked it brilliantly. There's one scene where some of the plastic on the window gets wrenched, and so you realise that actually every window's got this. It's like a two-way mirror thing. People can't see in, but he can see out, which I thought was really good. And just little details like asking people to take their shoes off, I think, is quite an interesting power game, and who will and who won't. And initially the police all behave, and then towards later on they think, stuff you, I'm not taking my shoes off for anyone. So all those little character tropes I thought were really interesting, and the way so we discussed a lot of that along the way.
Well, as you say, there is a nice little moment with one of the policemen where he then doesn't take his shoes off the next time he's there, and he's like, it's a really small part, but having that little moment makes it very special. The house is actually almost a character in itself. I came from Kingston, so I know that area, and I recognise the house straight away. It's basically Molesey, Hampton Court area.
That's right, yeah.
I'm right, I thought I was right. That house is now forever sinister to me whenever I drive past it. But it's the shape of the door and the windows almost looks like a face. And I always thought, the houses down that road are incredible.
Yeah, beautiful.
But that it was going inside the house and the way they decorated it and the set design made it cold and made it kind of that not homely, and it really did suit your character. It kind of felt like lived in, but it wasn't quite, something was not quite right there, especially the basement. I guess there were locations all over London, but what was do you know the reason why you shot there? Because it was supposedly meant to be Dulwich, wasn't it?
There was something happened later on in pre-production. I can't remember what. Yes, I think they lost the house they wanted. And we ended up, in fact, as so often happens, you think crisis, it's all going to be a disaster, and actually it turns out to be better. I think that house, not that I saw the original, the former house, but this worked out really, really well. And there was another location very close to there, actually, which suited the house that we see at the very end. So we were able to film in quite close proximity, which actually helped a lot of things. But I remember in that road, it was quite surreal, because there was every day there'd be the kids walking back and forth from school, and one of the little kids spotted me, and so the next day the mum came over and said, could Mr. Brown come and have tea, if you get a break. So I went and had tea with this little kid who'd seen Paddington, and we had sandwiches and everything, chatted about Paddington, and I was thinking, if only you knew what's going on next door. That's not... He said, what are you doing? I said, we're just making a film, a bit like Paddington, but maybe a bit different.
Maybe wait a few years to watch that one.
Exactly, yeah.
If I may, the Life and Film podcast that I do always talks about how people get into the industry, and obviously doing this film now, this is a different role for you. But how did the passion for acting? Where did that come from? I heard I think it was an interview with you a while back saying that you used to have a box with like dress up, and you used to do plays with your friends and stuff like that. Was that the sort of the beginning of your passion for it?
It was really. Just the dressing up box at home. My father had done national service in the Far East, and my mum had been born in Egypt. And so they brought back bits of paraphernalia from their earlier days, which were just exotic as hell, and were in this sort of old trunk in the attic. And coupled with Granny's old fox fur stole or whatever, and it was a paradise for a dresser upper like me. And so I used to invent all these characters, and then try and persuade my mates from up the road to come and be in my plays. They just wanted to play football, so I pretended to be interested in football. And the trade-off was they had to come and be in my plays on the landing at home. And so that's where I got a sort of bug. I had an older brother and older sister who were really into their school drama as well, but they were that bit older, so I felt a bit like a bit of an only child at times, and so the dressing up box was my haven. But also just mum and dad were really into going to the theatre and that sort of thing, so I got introduced to going to plays quite early on. I was very fortunate and feel passionately about the arts in schools, and the diminution of the arts in education I think is criminal in a lot of states in the state sector, and I think it's absolutely intrinsic to us as human beings to be able to find ways of self-expression, and to have it cut out of the curriculum I think is appalling. But in terms of the bug, it was just being exposed to the arts as a kid, and finding that being on stage was a good laugh, and then I think I played my first decent part in a short little play, aged 9 or 10 at school, in which my character had to address the audience. And normally, having been in nativity plays or whatever, and you're just basically looking for where mum or dad is in the audience and waving and all that. This was the first time in character I had to address the audience, and I can remember, looking out and seeing all these little upturned faces, enjoying this story that I was telling them. And I really found that quite hypnotic. And I'd obviously been, in the audience watching other people doing plays, but to find that, quote, shared experience was really exciting. And that's, I think, where I got the bug. But professionally, I never thought I'd do it professionally, but it was always a hobby throughout my teens. And the National Youth Theatre was a absolute changing point for me, a real milestone, because suddenly I was doing plays with all other kids that loved doing them too. Because frankly, being at school, some kids were put in plays as detention and hated it, but I loved it. And so the National Youth Theatre was very formative. And then after university, I went to drama school and started there. But I never never anticipated doing film or TV. Theatre was my thing. So it's really weird how things turn out.
Well, yeah, I mean, guess if someone could tell you when you were a child at that age that you'd be here now doing a press junket about a film that you've done for Netflix, and Netflix didn't exist then, but at this level, I mean, would you have believed it at the time?
No, because I had this weird thing in my head that sort of British actors were quite good at theatre, and that they were rubbish at doing screen acting, and that the Americans were really good at screen acting but didn't do theatre. That's completely, stupid. Whatever I was, 10, 12, that was my theory. But of course, you saw these amazing, iconic screen performances from legendary actors in my vintage, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and seeing performers like De Niro and Pacino and Brando, etc. And you think, none of our British actors can touch that. And then you see equally iconic performances, going on from any actor from around the world, frankly, in any nationality. Good acting is good acting. There is, of course, a difference between screen and stage. It's the way you project or the way you don't project, what's going on behind the eyes, all those sorts of things. But I never thought it was a world that I'd get to dip into, because it wasn't a world I had any experience of, and nor had I any experience of professional theatre come to that. So, my family was medical and had no contacts with it really in the industry at all. So I started out very naive and fresh, and just loved doing plays and learning my craft that way. And funnily enough, it was when I was at the RSC at the Royal Shakespeare Company and didn't get my contract renewed, not through bad behaviour, I hope not anyway, but just simply because the cycle of plays had come to an end, and I was anticipating staying on and staying for several years, which I would have loved to have done, and it didn't happen, and I felt utterly bereft, because I thought I'd never work again and all that. And actually that was when I got my first proper telly job, and that sort of led to more telly and etc. And so it went on. And so, as I say, that strange career, change I never thought would happen, that I started doing more camera stuff. And I last did a play in 2018 or 19, and I hope to do some more next year. But it's strange how things take over, and I've done more camera work in the last 15, 20 years than theatre.
First love being obviously theatre, but would you? Yeah, I mean, having a mix of the two must be fantastic. Would you ever dare to choose one or the other? Is there a favourite? Obviously, you have to say film, because we're here talking about film.
If the pay was better in theatre, I'd probably say theatre. But no, I do feel very, very fortunate to be able to work in both. And have a bit more choice and opportunity in both. But I love both disciplines. I mean, the simple fact is, on stage, you have complete and utter control over your performance, and the camaraderie that you form in rehearsal, you take into the theatre every night. On screen, it's the other way. You are the least important cog in the machine, apart from those X number of minutes when you're on camera, and it's the crew that form that bond and that day in, day out, and they work damn sight harder than the actors do. Let's face it. They're there from dawn till dusk and beyond in certain departments, and the actors, arrive and do their bit. And we're all using different skill sets, so I'm not demeaning one or the other. But the fact is the overall caravan, the sort of the troupe is the crew on a film set or a TV set, and the actors pop in and out, and the opposite almost is true in theatre. So as an emotional experience, as a creative experience, one could argue that the rehearsal process and the building together of a piece of work that will be performed in a finite space of time, night after night, and tomorrow night you might get it right, is possibly more nourishing for the artist than the film work. But that's a huge generalisation, because I've had wonderful experiences on camera as well.
I find I'm an actor myself, and I always feel sorry for actors that you see them if they're in a huge film and they've got that one line, and you can almost sometimes tell that they're like overthinking those 3 words, whatever it is, and that's why I point out the policeman in the film, where his part was fairly small, but he made the best of it, and having that little moment with the shoes is like a really memorable thing, and I remembered it when you said it. Earlier on in your career, when you were building up those credits, did you, having obviously now the wealth of credits that you do have, but early on, were you stressed when you went onto a set and you had to, do a small role? Obviously now it's probably fairly relaxing, but...
I wouldn't say it's relaxing, it's just slightly different, but I do remember, it's not in my IMDb credits, so you can't pin this one on me, but I remember going on to one of my very, very first jobs, and I had 2 lines. One of them survived. And
can you remember them?
No, I can't actually. And I went up to the lead actor, who I was doing the little scene with, on the breakfast bus. He just got off the breakfast bus, and I said, "Could we run our lines?" And the look of disdain he gave me was so utterly crushing, and I thought, I will never forget that look, and I will never forget what it means. And so I've always tried to make a point of making sure, if people are visiting a show like Downton or whatever, that they are looked after, or at least feel comfortable as much as possible, because that was pretty crushing. And I didn't fluff my lines, but I never forgot that moment, because I think we all need a help up, a hand to hold when we're starting out, and didn't get it from him.
Oh no! Would you dare to give advice, say to maybe your younger self instead of young actors today? But is there something that, if you could go back and say it's maybe it's going to be okay, or it's this or that? Have you got any advice you'd give?
I was given there was a great mentor of mine was the actress Celia Imrie, who I did a play with at the National, and I was new boy there, again sort of understudying and holding the spear, and I was terrified at the read through and all that. I was understudying Neil Dudgeon in a play, and Celia was in the cast as well, and she used to tell great stories about her mum, and was a great ally. But one of the pieces of advice I think she'd been given, and she said, "Do it now. Do it now." And so whenever I come to her with a question a bit later on, a few months later, or over the years, I'd say, "What do you think about she do it now?" Which was pretty good advice, I'd say. I think there's also a caveat to that, which is think it through, then do it now. I did make a complete arse of myself when I didn't get a part once, and I've written about this. I've written a book that comes out in October, and I quote it in there that the wonderful writer David Nichols had written a TV show, and I was so absolutely sure I was right for the part, and I didn't get the part, and I wrote to him telling him what a fucking idiot he was, and that they'd made a huge mistake. And to his great credit, he wrote back a hilarious letter saying, "I'm sure we've made a big mistake, and when this show goes tits up, it'll be entirely my fault. And if you see a drowning hand waving, saying Hugh, and you ignore me, I'll know why. And all that. And bless him, to his credit. I think that one I probably shouldn't have sent. It was, I mean, I hope. I mean, he's, you know, I bumped into him once or twice since, and he hasn't stabbed me. But I think the petulance of youth, I think, or the impetuousness. I think maybe cool that down, think it through, then do it now.
Do it now, that's a good one, I remember that. I feel like after watching this movie, I will never be able to watch Paddington again in the same way. Okay. The minute that your character goes quite still, I'll be like, is he going to turn? But is there any hope of another Paddington movie? Is there one in the works at all? I don't know whether or not you can even...
Yeah, no, there has been. In fact, they announced it not so long ago. Apparently it's called Paddington in Peru, so that gives you a taster. Like, there isn't a finished script yet, or indeed a production date, so it's a little way off in the future, and I don't know even if they're going to want Mr. Brown back, so we'll have to see.
Dear Aunt Lucy, you sent me to London to find a home. I have a wonderful family. I think you're in great shape for a man your age, Mr. Brown.
Ah, thank you, Paddington.
Hang on, how old do you think I am?
Oh, about 80?
Another one I have to ask about is Downton Abbey. You've done the series, you've done 2 films. Is there hope of another movie?
I don't know. I mean, I sort of fluctuate between saying, oh no, it's all over, quick while you're ahead, we had a lovely time and all that. On the other hand, the audience's appetite for it is extraordinary, and the love for it and the affection that so many people seem to have for it is still bewildering, and, you know, in a good way. So you never know. So long as we can keep, you know, Julian Fellowes propped up with a pen in his hand, maybe, I don't know. It's up to him.
Me and my girlfriend take it's like a tradition. You need to do another one, because we take her grandma to the cinema to go and watch it, right. And she loves it. She really enjoys it. So you have to, just for her, you have to do another Downton Abbey.
Okay.
I came by. It feels quite different to anything else that I've seen on Netflix. I feel like it's almost a movie that could have come out in the 80s or 90s, a really enjoyable, like, thriller. Are you kind of planning to work again with the director? Is there any sort of future plans to sort of do another movie like this, perhaps?
Well, to pick up on a couple of things that, I'd love to work with back again once he's out of the loony bin, because he's clearly mad. But secondly, what you just said about, you know, this reminded you of certain films from the 80s and 90s, say, and I was reflecting on that earlier. I think you're absolutely right, and it's great that Netflix have supported this film and films like it that they are doing, both in the cinema and on the streaming platform. That these you know, we are very used now to box sets of 10 episodes where we really immerse ourselves in long-form drama and long-form character development, etc. But to be able to tell a story, as let's face it, the film industry did for decades, in 90 minutes or 100 minutes or, you know, 200 minutes, and tell a finite story with as much depth and texture as the films that you referred to earlier, the Hitchcocks, whatever, is a genuine skill and is a genuine part of this art form that I think is absolutely essential to celebrate and amplify as much as possible. And by which I mean the cinema, you know, and it's great that Netflix are putting this out in certain UK cinemas, because there is nothing like experiencing a movie with other people, be it a blockbuster or indeed a you know, Christ who's behind that door type thriller, and to have that shared experience is wonderful. We can all watch films on our laptops, our phones, or whatever. But to actually be in a cinema, to make that conscious choice to go to a venue where we share the experience, I think is absolutely wonderful. And films like this, which have an intellectual rigor about them, as well as, you know, hopefully a cracking plot and good characters that you're interested to see how they develop, is that it is that arc of a story in a one-off experience, and you know, that they're the heart and meat and I think the pulse of cinema, and long may they continue.
I love movies like this. It kind of did remind me, obviously, the Hitchcock, but it did remind me of things like Fatal Attraction. Yeah. Movies that when you're watching them, you just know it's escalating to somewhere not good, and character-driven. I'd love to see more of these sort of movies. It feels like something that, as you say, in cinema as well, to have the audience, to have everything like that. And with comebacks like, you know, having the new Top Gun, there seems to be a lot of throwbacks to a different era. And this definitely had that feel, but also current, as you know, you were saying about the current issues it talks about as well. In terms of obviously we've talked about you working and doing all these amazing things, but as an actor, when you're out of work, perhaps earlier in your career, did you have any sort of, I think it's important to talk about, you know, for actors or people even in the film industry, different, if you're in the crew or whatever you're doing, being freelance, those downtimes where you're trying to get work and you're trying to get work but you can't. Do you have any coping mechanisms for being out of work, or those downtimes, hobbies perhaps that help you get through the sort of? I'm sure you don't have any gaps now, but back in the day.
Well, it's the other way around. I was ferociously busy because of that sense of needing to keep working. I took every single job that moved, and I was very fortunate to work constantly in theatre for pretty much 10 years, pretty much without a break, or knowing that there was a new job coming shortly over the horizon in theatre. So I was, and I remain one of the luckiest actors I know for that reason, that I managed to keep working. It's actually a little, I'm in the luxurious position of being a bit more selective now. But in terms of the coping mechanism, it's as simple as this: that the rejection is part of the job, and it's that old thing of being thin-skinned and thick-skinned. That obviously, once you're in the audition room, then you can show. Then you're expected to show the thin skin, the vulnerability, the range of your talent, or whatever it may be, whatever's required of you on that day. And then as soon as you're out the door, you have to have the thick skin on and go. It doesn't matter if I don't get it. It's not personal. I always think of the opening of Tootsie, where Dustin Hoffman's going through all those auditions, and saying I can be shorter, I can be taller, I can be this. Say no, we just don't want you, and trying not to take that personally when of course you feel it's totally personal at the time, when actually it is about chemistry and everything else and where you fit in the jigsaw puzzle. That's one of the hardest things to, I think, preserve, and it doesn't get that much easier. Again in the book, available from all good bookstores for pre-order, I loathe with a passion the self-tape, and I know it's all become part of the vocabulary these days, but I think it is a disgraceful way to interview someone for a job, it was a necessity for a long time. It is by and large no longer a necessity, and the laziness of production companies now saying, let's just get all these poor actors not even poor actors, let's just get these annoying actors just to put themselves on tape day in, day out, and for these agents and their agents' assistants to have to put all these packages together and upload them. I think, just meet the people face to face, you can, and let the producers and directors on the ground make the decisions. And not have to go up through the food chain. That's my rant over. But
I'll have one in a minute.
It's just the beginning. I've now can't even remember the point. But what was the question? I can't remember what the question was.
I actually can't remember. I feel like the rant has taken over.
Actually,
it was about gaps in jobs, but then
gaps in jobs, bloody hell. Yes, so being able to cope with the thin skin and the thick skin and the rejection. It doesn't get any easier with age. I'd done a movie with a very well-known director, and was asked to go on tape, for his next film, which I thought, fucking hell, I've worked with you, so and you've seen my range, and it said on the instructions, please give an account of your career, or say things that you've done in your career. So I was able to say, well, I've done things like a show called Downton Abbey, and I've been in films called Paddington, and actually I was in your film as well. Anyway, thank you for allowing me to audition today, and I didn't get the part, obviously. But that's me, age 58, still auditioning. So it never leaves you. I do also remember working with a wonderful actor, Sir Ian Holm, who's no longer with us, but I did a film with him 15, 20 years ago now, and we were walking back to the hotel after dinner. We were in Italy, and he was looking a bit tired, and I said, are you having a break after this film? He said, oh, no, I've got to go back to New Zealand to pick up some Lord of the Rings, and then in the spring I'm starting this particular film, and then I go on to do this project. And I said, why didn't you just take a break? He said, well, because the phone might stop ringing. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's Sir Ian Holm, aged 68 or whatever he was at the time, thinking it doesn't get any easier. We are freelancers, we are at the beck and call of others. The only power we have is the power of no. Unless you're Ken Branagh and producing your own stuff. But on the whole, most of us who are on the taxi rank principle, we are guns for hire or cabs for hire. We want to keep working. At least that's true of most of the actors I know, and we feel therefore pretty fortunate when we do.
This is a tradition with my podcast. I always ask, have you got an anecdote, a story? I say most embarrassing moment, but maybe a corpsing story or something where you're on set and it's something you're willing to share with us. Just to humanise you for the audience,
Oh, crumbs. Oh, God, I'm really bad at this.
So it's the worst last question as well.
It is.
You've got to think
tell
about
us do something funny now. Tell us something funny now. Worst moment. In real life, there's been plenty, Well, I can tell you the one about when we were opening Notting Hill in America, and I was on the pavement, on the sidewalk, with the director Roger Michel and his agent, and along the pavement towards us, as we were waiting for a cab, came this young guy, and what turned out to be his agent, who happened to be acquainted with Roger Michel, and went, lots of handshakes, and I didn't catch the name of the guy because there was traffic noise, and just shook hands, and he had these books under his arm, and I was looking at them, and then he said, "Hey, you want to see a photograph of me and Marty?" And I thought, what was he talking about? And he showed, there was a photograph of this young lad with Martin Scorsese. I said, "That's Martin Scorsese." And he said, "Yeah, like we're doing like a monobrow contest." And I was going, "What are you doing?" I said, "This young fucking whippersnapper is taking the mick out of Martin Scorsese's legendary director." And anyway, we said our goodbyes and got in the car, and I said, "Yeah, honestly, the cheek of these young actors." It was just, that was, God, I didn't even know who he was talking about. And Roger said, do you know who that was? I said, "No way, he's just a young upstart. Should have more respect for his seniors." And he said, "Well, I think Martin Scorsese can live with Leonardo DiCaprio talking to him like that, And these books were all about the gangs of New York under his arm. And of course, 2 years later, I realised that that's what they'd been discussing. And so that was pretty embarrassing. We were on our way to a party hosted by Julia Roberts for the opening of Notting Hill in New York, and somehow, by the time we got there, she'd already heard this story. She said, "You're turning into your character in Notting Hill. Doesn't recognise film stars."
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Hugh.
Cheers,
really
thank
appreciate
you.
it. Pleasure. Thank you.
Tell me, Anna, what do you do?
I'm an actress.
Oh, splendid.
What do you do?
I'm actually in the stock market myself, so not really similar field. Though I have done the odd bit of amateur stuff. P.G. Woodhouse, farce, all that, Careful there, Vicar. Always imagined it's a pretty tough job, though, acting. I mean, the wages are a scandal, aren't they?
They can be.
I see friends from university, clever chaps, been in the business longer than you. They're scraping by on 7,000-8,000 a year. Yeah, it's no life. What sort of acting do you do?
Films, mainly.
Oh, splendid. Oh, well done. How's the pay in movies? I mean, last film you did, what did you get paid?
$15 million.
Right. So that's fairly good.
Thank you to our guest Hugh, and thank you to Milk Publicity and Organic Publicity and Netflix for making this possible. I Came By is out in cinemas now and will be on Netflix from the 31st of August. And Hugh's new book, Playing Under the Piano, is out on the 13th of October. Support us on Patreon for early access to episodes, and follow us on TikTok. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have time, write a review. It all makes a huge difference. Thank you.
It's a life in film, and you better come back next month to a life in film, to a life in film, to a life in film, to a life in film.